Have you ever really thought about what's going on inside a regular school textbook? I mean, it's not just a random collection of stories and facts, right? There's this hidden architecture, a kind of secret life. So let's dive in and see if we can uncover the blueprint behind what looks like a totally ordinary school book.
Okay, so picture this. Our journey starts right here, on a cold, snowy afternoon. It's a scene that feels like it's pulled straight from the pages of Louisa May Alcott's classic, Little Women. It just has that familiar, kind of storybook feel, doesn't it?
And of course, every good story needs a hero, right? Well, meet Jo March. This one line, it just says everything about her. I like adventures, and I'm going to find some. She's not the type to sit around and wait for things to happen. Nope. She's going out to find the adventure.
All right, so let's get into the adventure she actually finds. It all kicks off with a really powerful story of friendship. So the story sets up these two totally different worlds. On one side, you've got the March family home. It's described as humble, maybe a little shabby, but it's absolutely buzzing with life. And then, right next door, there's this huge, stately mansion, but it feels completely empty, kind of lonely. That contrast, that's everything.
And living inside that grand, lonely house is a boy named Lori. Now, Jo, she has this incredible knack for seeing what's really going on with people. She looks right past all the money and sees a boy who's just lonely. She gets that he's missing the one thing her own family has tons of, real, honest connection.
So what does she do about it? Well, she takes action. And it's not some huge, dramatic gesture. It's a series of these small, really brave steps. First, a snowball tossed over the fence, just to say hello. Then, a simple offer to come visit him. And finally, she shows up with a small gift. It just goes to show how simple acts of kindness can completely change everything.
Okay, but this is where our adventure really starts, because we're not just here to talk about a classic novel. This story, it's being used for something much, much bigger.
And that brings us to the big question, the real puzzle here. Why is this classic American story, written way back in 1868, showing up in a modern textbook for students in India? I mean, when you think about it, it seems like a pretty random choice, doesn't it?
Well, the answer is inside this book right here, the English Yuvak Bharati. And trust me, this is not just a random collection of stories. It has been put together with a very specific and surprisingly modern mission.
And they don't hide it either. The mission is spelled out right in the preface. It says the goal of learning a language is to connect with the world. So suddenly the choice of stories isn't random at all, it's completely intentional.
So how exactly does that work? Let's take a look at the actual blueprint this textbook is using to turn these old stories into real practical skills for today. And this is where the textbook literally pulls back the curtain. This table, taken straight from the contents page, lays it all out. It connects every single story to specific language skills and, this is the important part, to life values. It's not left to chance. It's a very deliberate plan.
Let's make this super clear. Remember that moment when Jo just calls out to Lori, "How do you do? Are you sick?" In the textbook's world, that's not just a nice bit of dialogue. It's a perfect example of a learning goal, how to use spoken language in everyday life. The story itself becomes the lesson.
And it goes even deeper than just learning the language. Think about it. Each of Joel's actions is tied directly to a core human value. Her bold hello, that's about being friendly. Noticing Lori's loneliness, that's a lesson in empathy. Sharing her food, that's kindness. The story isn't just a story, it's a hands-on exercise in building character.
But it's not all about these big, timeless values. This textbook is very much focused on preparing students for the world right now. Let's talk about the skills for our modern world.
Yep. This is the core strategy right here. The textbook is basically building a bridge. It connects the emotional lessons from a story that's over 150 years old directly to the real-world communication challenges that students are facing today.
And we're talking about really tangible, practical skills. The curriculum uses these stories as a launchpad to teach things like blog writing, how to compose a proper email, interviewing skills, even how to write a film review. You know, the actual tools you need to communicate in today's world.
So what you end up with is this really beautiful combination. You take a timeless story about something fundamental like human connection, and you use it to teach a student how to write a blog post. It perfectly connects the why we communicate with the how we do it today.
And just to be clear, this whole philosophy isn't just about this one story from America. Not at all. It's designed as a journey through literature from all over the world.
I mean, just look at the sheer range here. Students get to travel from 19th century America with Louisa May Alcott, over to England with the poet William Wordsworth, and then to 20th century India with Dr. Ambedkar. They even dive into drama. This is what that phrase, connecting with the world, actually looks like in practice.
There's this quote from the teacher's guide that just nails it. The textbook isn't meant to be a final destination. It's more like a ship. The real goal is to send students off on this incredible voyage of discovery, with all of this literature acting as their map.
So, after all that, what's the big idea? The main takeaway? It's this. These stories are being used like sophisticated flight simulators, but for life. Sure, they teach language, but more importantly, they give students a safe space to learn how to understand other people and navigate our incredibly complex, interconnected world.
And this whole approach, it actually has a name. It's called activity-based learning. And it's basically the difference between just passively reading about something and actually being given the tools to engage with it. Students are learning by doing, by talking about it, and by making all these connections for themselves.
Which kind of leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. In a world that's changing so fast, maybe the best way to prepare for the future is to connect with the most timeless lessons from our past. Because stories like these, they don't just teach us about language, do they? They teach us about being human.
You know those stories in your old textbooks? The ones you'd read, answer a few questions on, and then, pretty much forget about? We usually think of them as just stories. But what if the very first story in the book was actually a kind of secret blueprint for the entire year? Let's go find a hidden lesson, one that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time. So, our investigation kicks off on a chilly afternoon inside a story called Being Neighborly. Now, this is an excerpt from Louisa May Alcott's classic Little Women, which was first published way back in 1868. And this isn't just some random story. It's the very first piece of prose in a modern English textbook, set in a world that feels, well, a long, long way from our own. And this is our hero, Jo March. She's energetic, she's bold, and as this line shows you, she's definitely not the type to just doze by the fire. It just perfectly sums up the spirit that drives this whole story. She isn't waiting around for an adventure to happen to her. She's going to go find one herself. So where does Jo's hunt for adventure take her? Well, on the surface, it's a really simple, charming story about how a friendship gets started. Right away, the story sets up this really powerful contrast. On one side of a little hedge, you've got the March family's home. It's modest, a little shabby, but it's just buzzing with life. And then on the other side, there's this grand stone mansion that seems to have every possible luxury you could ever imagine. But here's the thing. All that money, all that luxury, it can't buy happiness. From her window, Jo spots the boy next door, Laurie, and she realizes he is not having a good time in his so-called enchanted palace at all. He's stuck inside, he's sick, and as the book puts it, he's suffering for society and fun. The kid is just incredibly lonely. And what does our adventurous Jo do? She doesn't just feel bad for him from a distance. Nope, she acts. Step 1, she sees there's a need. Step 2, she gets his attention with a well-aimed snowball. Step 3, she calls out with a kind word. And step 4, she takes the leap, literally, and goes over to visit. It's like a simple 4-step guide to making a connection. And that's pretty much it. That one simple, neighborly act is the spark that starts one of the most famous friendships in all of literature, a beautiful story all about empathy. But this brings us right back to our central mystery. Because this charming little story is actually building towards something much, much bigger. We have to look past the narrative and start asking why. Why is this story here in the first place? Okay, this is the big question. Out of every single story in the entire world, why pick this one, a tale that's over 150 years old, to kick off a modern curriculum? What's the real lesson that students are supposed to be learning here? Well, the answer is sitting right here, inside the English Yuvak Bharati textbook. This book was created for 11th grade students in India. And let me tell you, this story's placement wasn't just a random choice. It was a very deliberate, very foundational decision by the people who designed the curriculum. And you don't even have to guess. The textbook's own preface tells you its mission statement. The goal isn't just about learning English grammar. It's about getting students ready to navigate a really complex global world. It's about understanding different people, different cultures, a goal that honestly Jo March herself seems to perfectly represent. So this brings us to the educational blueprint. How on earth does a story from 1868 actually help students achieve this very modern goal? The teacher's notes reveal the whole strategy. It's called activity-based learning. The idea is that you don't really learn a language just by reading silently to yourself. You learn it through communication, through discussion, through sharing, which is exactly what Joe does with Lori. The stories themselves are meant to be prompts for action. In fact, the textbook lays it all out for you. There's an actual roadmap. This table, right at the start of the section, connects every single story to specific skills or competencies, breaking them down into language study, writing skills, and, this is the important part, life skills.
Okay, so let's use this roadmap and connect the dots ourselves. Think back to the story for a second. Remember that moment when Joe just breaks the silence and calls out to Lori in his window? She isn't just talking. According to the textbook's own list of skills, she is actively demonstrating how to use spoken language fluently, how to speak confidently, and how to pick the right tone, formal or informal, for the situation. The story becomes a living, breathing case study in effective communication.
But it goes even deeper than just language skills, right? I mean, what about the reason behind her actions? Her choice to reach out to someone who's feeling isolated and sad? Well, the roadmap makes that crystal clear too. The core values that are listed for this specific chapter are being friendly and empathy. So the story isn't just telling students about empathy, it's showing them exactly what empathy looks like in action.
And what's really amazing is how this whole curriculum uses a 19th century story to build the skills you absolutely need for the 21st century.
I mean, look at the full list of skills this book wants to teach. It goes way beyond just talking across a hedge. We're talking email and blog writing, using Skype and Zoom, and even how to use social media responsibly. The empathy Joe shows Lori is the exact same emotional intelligence that's needed to navigate our super complex digital world today. So you see what they're doing? The textbook is building a bridge. It's using the timeless, universal power of a good story to teach the practical skills that are essential for today.
And being neighborly is really just the first step on a much, much longer journey.
The rest of the textbook takes students through this incredible range of voices, from famous poets like William Wordsworth to social reformers like Dr. Adwitiya, all the way to the master of drama himself, William Shakespeare. Every single text is a new chance to practice those core skills of communication, of analysis, and of empathy. Which brings us to this final thought. The hidden lesson in this textbook isn't really about being a good neighbor. It's an answer to one of the biggest questions we have in education. How do you use the wisdom of the past to build the skills we desperately need for the future? And the answer, it seems, might just start with a simple act of kindness. Have you ever wondered what a textbook is really trying to do? What if it wasn't just about teaching a language, but about building a better world? Today, we're going to tear down and rebuild a textbook that's designed to do exactly that, to shape not just minds, but compassionate, globally aware people. So let's see how they pull it off. But first, let's start with a basic question. What is an English class actually for? I mean, is it just about grammar and vocabulary and writing essays? Or could it be something more? Something that fundamentally shapes how we see the world, and maybe more importantly, how we see each other. Well, we might just find some pretty surprising answers inside this book right here. It's the English Yuvak Bharati textbook for students in Maharashtra, India. And just so you know, everything we're about to dive into comes straight from its pages. Because, when you really start to look closely, you realize this isn't just a random collection of lessons. No, this is a carefully crafted tool, and it has a very specific and I'd say very human mission. On the surface, it's exactly what you'd expect, right? It's a required English textbook for 11th graders published by the Maharashtra State Bureau of Textbook Production. But the moment you look past the standard exercises, you find this incredibly profound mission statement. So, what is this book really trying to accomplish? The great thing is, we don't even have to guess. We can just flip to the preface, where the creators lay out their entire philosophy for everyone to see. And right away, you can see they're setting the bar high. This isn't just about learning English as a subject. It's about using the language as a bridge, a way to connect with people and cultures and ideas far, far beyond your own backyard. And this is where it gets really powerful. The creators are making a pretty bold claim here that literature isn't just for entertainment. It's a tool for developing empathy. It's a way to step into someone else's shoes, to understand their life, their struggles, their whole world.
So you see what's happening? The mission here isn't just academic, it's deeply human. The whole point is to help create students who aren't just good at communicating, but who are also compassionate and thoughtful members of a global community.
Okay, that's a beautiful idea for sure, but how do you actually make it happen in the real world? Well, the book's creators have a very clear plan for that, a kind of blueprint that's laid out in 4 distinct parts. And believe me, nothing in this book is there by accident. The structure itself is a teaching tool, and it's designed to guide students and teachers from one type of learning to the next in a really logical and, frankly, enriching way. This 4-part structure shows this incredible balance. It's not just about reading old stories. They've mixed the emotional depth you get from prose and poetry with the practical, modern skills you actually need, like writing blogs and emails. It's a whole system designed to build a complete skill set, from appreciating art to communicating effectively online. And this right here, this is the secret sauce. The book takes one piece of literature and basically uses it as a launchpad to teach everything else. A single story becomes a lesson in grammar, it becomes a prompt for creative writing, and most importantly, it becomes a real discussion about life skills. Okay, so let's see this theory in action. Let's zoom way in on the very first prose lesson in the book to see exactly how all these pieces fit together. So, what's the chosen text? It's a chapter called Being Neighborly, from the American classic Little Women. Now, this is a story written over 150 years ago, set in a suburb of Boston. So you have to ask, right, why this specific story for students in 21st century India? Well, the story centers on these 2 characters who could not be more different. You've got Jo March, who comes from a humble but incredibly warm and loving family, and then there's her new neighbor, Laurie. He lives in this huge, fancy mansion, but he's also sick, lonely, and, I love this line from the book, he's suffering for society and fun. So what happens next is really simple, but it's so powerful. Jo sees that Laurie's lonely. She takes a tiny risk, tossing a snowball to get his attention, and then she does something huge. She crosses the physical boundary between their homes to visit him, and she brings all that warmth of her family with her. And this quote from the story, this is the absolute heart of the lesson. Jo's action, it doesn't come from a place of pity. It comes from a sense of abundance. She realizes how rich she is, not in money, but in happiness, and her first instinct is just to share it. And that's the magic of it, isn't it? A story from a completely different time, a completely different continent, is being used to teach a lesson that is absolutely universal and timeless, that human impulse we all have to connect with each other and to care. Now here is the key. The textbook doesn't just hope you get the message. It doesn't leave it to chance. It explicitly connects this story to 2 core life skills, being friendly and empathy. The literature becomes a direct pipeline for character education. It's brilliant. And this whole method, linking classic literature to modern life skills, it's not a one-off. It is the foundation of the entire textbook. The whole thing is geared towards preparing students for the world they're actually living in right now. And just look at the skills this book is trying to build. It's this amazing blend of the totally practical, like digital communication, and the really deep philosophical stuff, like developing a humanistic and liberal mindset. This is really a curriculum for the whole person. So now you can see how those 4 separate sections, prose, poetry, writing, and drama, all work together. They're all designed to create one single, powerful outcome, to build a foundation of skills not just for passing a class, but for building a career and, honestly, a fulfilling life. So when you put it all together, the philosophy in the preface, the deliberate 4-part structure, and these carefully chosen stories like Being Neighborly, you start to see that this isn't just a textbook. It's a complete system designed to teach students how to read, how to write, how to think, and ultimately, how to connect. And that leaves us with a final thought to chew on. We so often think of education as just, filling a mind with information. But what if its true purpose is bigger than that? What if every subject, every lesson, and every single textbook was designed with the explicit goal of shaping not just smarter students, but better human beings? I mean, what would that even look like?